So in a time of famine, the most strategic thing that you will need is to secure the position of the voice of God. The reason why we are turning to God is so that we can receive. You see, God is so deep. Are you with me? God is so deep. In the book of Genesis, God decides to visit with Abraham, and he introduces himself to Abraham as the El Shaddai. Are you there? The El Shaddai, the strong, the one that can overcome every situation. The one that can overcome every circumstance. The multi-breasted, the one that can sustain every generation. So it's the strong that can overcome. It's the multi-breasted that can sustain. This was the introduction of himself that he brought to Abraham. And we see what he overcame in the life of Abraham was barrenness. He overcame barrenness in the life of Abraham. And I don't want to go into that. He overcame famine in the life of Isaac. So we are going to go into the life of, and he overcame poverty. Poverty is personal. Famine is corporate. Are you there? Poverty is individualized. Famine is an affliction. It's a regional affliction. It's a national affliction. It's a territorial affliction. Famine is an indication of the fact that the territory is sick and needs a healer. Okay? And so we are going to look at the life of Isaac. Because you must have, okay, did I tell you the meaning of Ben-Hadad? The son of Hadad, and Hadad is the god of the storm and the rain. So in the days of Isaac, as he sojourned in the land of Canaan, there was famine. And this famine was occasioned by the fact that there was no rain in the Middle East. I don't know if I read a lot. I read a lot. To be able to pastor you, I have to read a lot on a daily basis so that I can pastor you. I believe that the last time I read about the weather of the Middle East, if I'm not mistaken, there are some countries in the Middle East that can only have 2 experiences of rainfall in an entire year. And there are periodic seasons where for a stretch of years, there will be no rain. So you see, these cycles of rainlessness comes generationally. So there was such a time in the days of Abraham when there was no rain in the Middle East. And what they normally do, the economic strategy for such circumstances is to move down to Africa, move down to Egypt, because Egypt was watered by the Nile. Even if there is a situation of rainlessness, some form of irrigation can take place because of the presence of the Nile. So the most reasonable thing, the most academic thing to do in a situation where a famine besieges the territory is to move to Egypt, because in Egypt there'll be supplies of all kinds. And that's why Egypt was a breadbasket in those days in seasons where famine hit so hard. So you will see Abraham, right? You will see Abraham going down to Egypt, even though that was not an instruction that God gave him. And because God was not behind his moving to Egypt under the circumstances of famine, he confronted some situations that he could not handle. One of such situations was that Pharaoh, I know you know, fell in love with his wife, and all those complications that began to take place. And it was in Egypt that Abraham was pressed to the wall, and Abraham denied his wife and said his wife is his sister. Imagine me saying, oh, Morgan is my sister. Well, I don't want to go into all those details. I've looked into that matter. I've looked into it. Maybe when we are talking about marriage, we'll bring it up. The Lord will help us in Jesus' name. Now, the reason why he had to lie to defend himself was because God was not the one that led him there. Even though it was the correct thing to do academically. But he did not have a leading from God. He had to lie his way out of the territory. And there was a temptation for Isaac to follow the same pattern when the same famine replicated itself in his own generation. You see that there's a pattern of famine that was hitting the Middle East periodically, such that it features in every single generation. And every single generation will have a taste of the famine. Are you there? Say, are you with me? The guy was already making plans to move down to Egypt when he heard the voice of God. Don't go to Egypt. Remain in this land. And right in this land, I'm going to bless you. You must understand that when God deals with your economic situation, many strategies he will recommend may not be intellectually suitable for the situation. That will look counterproductive. And that's why you will need a heart of faith to be able to walk with God. You need a heart of faith to be able to deal with God. Are you there? All right, so God spoke to him. Let us trace a few scriptures here. Trace a few scriptures here and see what can we do Genesis chapter 26 verse 1? Genesis chapter 26 verse 1. And there was a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. The Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee, sojourn in this land. You see, these encounters are different encounters. The encounter in verse 2 is different from the encounter in verse 3. Give me verse 2. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt. He was already preparing himself because that's the intellectually correct thing to do. It was only Egypt that had what it takes to sustain plant production because of the Nile. And he's already captured in the history of his father that when such a situation came, he had to go to Egypt for sustenance. So he was not about to ask God about the matter because there was already a pattern that was created. And unknown to him, that pattern was created in disobedience. That pattern was created without talking to God. Hallelujah. That's why we follow God. Even if you have a very good example of how a matter was tackled, God may not be willing to tackle that matter the same way he tackled it before in your own case. And that's why the king said, if God does not help us, from whence can I get help? It means the king himself became a preacher of that day. And he was pointing the congregation, pointing the nation to go back to their altar and to consult with God. Because it is from the mind of God that the wisdom that we need for survival as a people and as individuals is going to come. So the first encounter he had, this was what God told him. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. So at this time, God had not told him the land. It means that God is inviting him for deeper consultations, deeper prayers. You might be in search of wisdom from God, and what comes to you from the heart of God does not spell out the whole pathway of wisdom. It means God is saying, stay put. There are other subsequent encounters that I want to bring to you. The other day, a brother came to me and he said that God has spoken to him to leave the ministry that he's serving because he has an assignment for him. And he went and resigned. So when he came to me, I said, okay, where did he say you should go? He said that information had not yet come. And you have resigned already. You resigned on half wisdom. Because the profit that wisdom brings is in his ability to give direction. You have received the first part of the direction, which is that your time in this particular ministry has come to an end. But you have not received the second part of the wisdom, which now shows you what you will be doing when you leave this ministry. So he resigned with insufficient wisdom. It will surprise you to know that God can give you the first part of the wisdom, and then the second part of the wisdom will come 5 years later. Whenever you take off like a tornado, without the complete package, you are going to be a victim of Ben-Hadad. Ben-Hadad is looking for someone that will be careless, that will not be careful to secure wisdom from God. And the person, oh my God, he besieged the city. And the only way out is wisdom. And if you become careless in your handling of this wisdom, you become a victim of the impact of the presence of Ben-Hadad. It might take 5 years for the second leg to come out, but he had already moved, and he didn't know where he was going. So the man pressed further, and he said, okay, oh Lord, you said you will show me the land that you want me to dwell, where you will sustain me. Now, the question is this: is it not the same energy? Are you there? Is it not the same energy that God used in verse 3 to tell him the land? It's the same energy that God used to tell him, I will show you the land. Why did God not just avoid verse 2 and then go straight to the direction in verse 3? God knows you and me. And God will only show up when you seek him with all of your heart. The fullness of that which you seek will never be made available until he has judged that your seeking was done with all of your heart. That means I have no other defense. I have no other salvation. I have no other support. You are my only support. When he knows that you are at that point, then he gives you what you will need for the journey. So in verse 3, he shows up again and says, sojourn in this land. At the end of the day, the golden land that God was talking about was actually the land where he was dwelling. Why did he? That's how God is. He wants to know if you will wait for him. He wants to know whether you have another alternative. He will waste your time for a period. And if it is true that you have another plan B, you will jump at it and leave him alone. It's only those people that don't have any other plan that will see the glory of God. Listen to me. God is not a man. If you go to the economics class in Benue State University, they will give you numerous assortments of solutions to the economic meltdown. The lecturers know it, even though they are not working in it. But at least they know it. They will be saying something. The thing they are saying, they are not experiencing it. But they will be saying it. God doesn't give you an intellectual answer. He doesn't give you an answer that seems to suggest that, that is one high intellectual strategy. God will give you an answer that if you are not sure it is him, you will despise the answer. Because the answer doesn't seem to have the ability to address the issue for which it came. The same land that has been bedeviled by famine, God is asking Isaac, remain in that land and I will bless you. It has not rained in this land. How do you bless a man in a land that has been reproached by lack of rain. Ben-Hadad, the deity of storm and rain, has come against the territory. How do you bless a man? You know, when walking with God, put your mind behind. You can only walk with him with your heart. Your heart is the organ that yields to him even when it doesn't make sense. If you need to make sense out of everything that God says, you will never walk with God. God is determined to confound your wisdom. God is determined to ensure that you get to experience the fact that it doesn't need to sound intellectual in order for it to come with salvation. Remember the recommendation of the king. If the Lord does not help us, from whence can I bring the help?